Welcome back. The biggest and for consumers the most familiar of the Irving businesses is Irving Oil. About 75,000 Maritimers a day do business with Irving Oil, buying gas at one of its 500 or so stations in the region. In the Maritimes, no one is bigger. But still, the region has proven to be too small for the company, and increasingly it's spreading out into the United States. It's an expansion that's hard not to admire. That is, until you begin to realize how some of it is being financed. Robert Jones tonight with Self-Serve, the story of Irving Oil.
In the darkness, it's an imposing sight, noisy, fiery, massive, and all day, all night, multi-billion-dollar-a-year, sleepless giant. It's the Irving Oil Refinery, well known as Canada's largest refinery, but more than that, on its own, it is also Atlantic Canada's single biggest business enterprise. Of the dozens of Irving's money-making enterprises, it makes the most money. Of the family's giant operations, it is the biggest. And yet, of all of Irving's businesses, it's the one that seems to make the least sense. The Irving Oil Refinery is an impressive achievement on many levels. But the most impressive thing about it is probably that it even exists at all. The Maritimes are far too small to support a refinery of this size. The region has no real historical connection to the oil and gas industry and no real geographical advantages that makes this all make sense. And yet, here it is, working because Irving makes it work, and working here because here is where Irving is from. In business terms, it's a grand achievement, but it's not achievement that comes without a cost one could easily argue Maritimers in particular have to pay for dearly every day.
Go ahead. Tommy, when you're up around the fans, I'm running 100 degrees, my prototype, not all man belts and fans.
These guys are running it rated at its full capacity, virtually 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We're competing against some of the biggest companies in the world, and we're doing it successfully. And, you know, as an Atlantic Canadian, that obviously makes me feel very proud.
Kenneth Irving is the #2 man at Irving Oil, answering only to his father, Arthur. One day, the entire oil business will be his to run, and he knows the refinery is the key to it all. It operates at full capacity virtually every hour of every day. In 2 minutes, it produces enough petroleum to fill an entire tanker truck. In a day and a half, enough to fill one of the company's 4 coastal tankers. And in less than a week, it can produce more gasoline than all of Prince Edward Island will consume in a year.
If we were just moving barrels into our own domestic marketplace, there wouldn't be enough demand to support the refinery. The refinery is tooled to export.
Kenneth Irving points out that the refinery is far too big for the Maritimes to support, and instead sits in the center of a worldwide business network that Irving has constructed, a network that hangs together in a surprisingly delicate way. Huge supertankers like Irving's own Galloway unload crude oil from Europe and Africa at Irving's deepwater terminal. The ships carry up to $40 million worth of crude oil at a time, a huge supply, but still only enough for the refinery to run on for 10 days. Inside, a surprisingly small number of employees arrive each day to process the oil non-stop, the whole operation directed from a state-of-the-art control room. Outside, the refinery's complete production, gasoline, heating oil, diesel, and jet fuels leave the plant as quickly as the crude oil arrives. And while tanker trucks depart at all hours, delivering product to hundreds of Irving gasoline stations within driving distance, by far most of the production is fed straight to the docks and loaded onto Irving's own fleet of ships for a trip into the most competitive gasoline market in the world.
More than half of production is exported, and most of that export goes into the northeastern United States, although there are some barrels that move further afield, like places like Brazil, or occasionally we move some barrels to Europe. But by and large, most of the barrels we export move into the northeastern United States.
Irving says to survive, the refinery has no alternative but to send shiploads of its huge daily production right into the United States. And although about 20% of those shipments go directly to Irving's growing American retail network, the vast majority of the product is sold off on the open spot market in Boston. But to sell in that league, the price of the product leaving the refinery has to be rock bottom, which Irving says means the refinery has to operate as efficiently as possible.
We're situated right here on the Atlantic coast. That means that we're exposed to all the competitors around the world. The people that are moving barrels of product into the northeastern United States are people like Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. We get a lot of Europeans moving product in there. The big Caribbean refineries are moving product in there. The largest refineries along the Texas Gulf Coast are moving barrels in there through a pipeline that runs directly from Texas right into New Jersey. So, you know, you have a lot of different competitors competing in there, and we're just one of them.
Succeeding in the U.S. means operating the refinery as efficiently as possible, and that means, in part, operating as close to full capacity as possible. And that means finding as many customers as possible to consume that output. It's a never-ending cycle that Irving's created to make its entire oil business work, a cycle that has a very strange side effect for maritime consumers.
In terms of pump price, doesn't mean a thing. It could be on Mars.
Mike Budd is a former Imperial oil executive who says the Irving refinery might as well be in outer space for all the good it does maritime consumers.
Irving would have an advantage having a refinery here in his cost structure, and presumably the market's letting him put it in his pocket. But whether the refinery's there or not really doesn't affect the price at that pump.
Budd now serves as head of Canada's Independent Gasoline Retailers Association and says Irving, not consumers, pocket the benefits of the low-cost, high-volume product coming out of the refinery. But more than that, he says oil company markups on gasoline run about 50% higher in the Maritimes than in the rest of Canada, and even more when compared to nearby states.
Factually, in Maine, the retail margin, the difference between the wholesale price and the pump price, is half, almost exactly half what it is in New Brunswick. I don't think the operating costs are that difference. This is on an all taxes out basis, so you can't say, you know, we pay higher taxes or whatever. Factor all of that out, just on a straight ex-tax basis. The margin is almost double here what it is in Maine. And Maine
Budd says as a region, the Maritimes, home to some of the lowest cost gasoline produced in North America, nevertheless suffers some of the highest gasoline prices in North America, an oddity that ironically can best be seen inside Irving itself. Here we are. The date is February 2nd, the time 5:30 a.m. And at a local Irving station, the closest station we can find to the refinery itself, we pull our CBC van in for a fill-up. We're here to start a trip deep into Irving's own retail network from the Maritimes to Massachusetts to investigate gasoline prices at as many Irving stations as we can find. The thing we're interested in, of course, is the price of gasoline, and this morning at this particular station, in the shadow of the giant Irving oil refinery, the price we're being charged for regular self-serve unleaded is 59.7 cents a liter. On On that morning, the price we started with was 59.7 cents a liter, a price that, as it turned out, was fairly typical around the Maritimes. For example, later that morning in Fredericton, this Irving station was selling gas for 59.4 cents a liter, while in Moncton, this Irving station was also at 59.4. Meanwhile, in Charlottetown, the price was the same as St. John at 59.7 cents a liter, the same price posted at this Irving station in Halifax. 5 prices from 5 different maritime communities on the same day, and all of them within fractions of a cent.
The street price is a very a competitively set price.
At his office in downtown St. John, Kenneth Irving says the prices we would have seen on February 2nd would be good prices, and says people should understand that much of what they believe to be high prices are in fact high taxes.
There's a whole lot of factors that go into marketing, and the biggest difference, or the biggest factor in costing at the pump, is taxes. So clearly, if there's one province or one state that has higher taxes than the other, that's the most noticeable difference that usually makes its way to the pump price.
It's a good point that Irving makes. For example, in New Brunswick, when the price of gas is 59.7 cents a liter, nearly half of that amount, or 28.5 cents a liter, is made up by 4 separate federal and provincial taxes. That means that Irving's price, not including taxes, is actually just 31.2 cents a liter. In Prince Edward Island, taxes are slightly lower than in New Brunswick, and in Nova Scotia, they're slightly higher. So back to our 5 stations in 5 maritime communities on February 2nd, it's fairer to say that prices Irving was charging ranged from a low of 28.4 cents a liter in Halifax to a high of 33.8 cents in Charlottetown. Although it should be noted that prices in Prince Edward Island are set by government regulation, not by the oil companies. So how do those maritime Irving prices compare with Irving prices in the U.S.? Well, take for example Augusta, Maine. On the evening of February 2nd, we came across this Irving station on the outskirts of Augusta, the Maine state capital. The price, $1.06.9 US a gallon for regular self-serve. At $1.06, the comparison to the Maritimes isn't readily apparent. But if you take that price and subtract Maine state and federal taxes and a special Maine environmental fee, and then you convert the US gallon to the much smaller metric liter, and then convert the US dollar to Canadian dollars, you end up with a price of 26.2 cents a liter. That's what Irving was charging for a liter of gas in Augusta, Maine on February 2nd, a price more than 2 cents a liter less than Halifax, the lowest of our 5 maritime prices posted the same day, and 5 cents less than the St. John price, where all the gas came from in the first place. But is that Augusta price normal?
Right now you're in Augusta, or Manchester, right?
John Babb is a Maine-based competitor of Irving, running his own oil company just outside of Augusta in Manchester, Maine. Babb owns 4 large stations under the brand name of Coastal, and a large wholesale business under the corporate banner of J&S Oil. And Babb says the price we had seen in Augusta the night before was very normal.
Today we're at 104.9 in Augusta, and 105.9 in Manchester, Farmingdale 104.9, and Winslow at 103.9.
Babb says all of his stations were actually below $1.06 the day we were there, and in fact prices all over southern and western Maine were low for Irving as well. In Brunswick, Maine, $1.07. In Fort Fairfield, $1.05. In South Paris, $1.04. And in Lewiston, Maine, $1.03. Even in tiny communities far from anywhere, like Freiburg, Maine, Irving's price was $1.09, an amount far cheaper than any of our 5 maritime prices.
These are average prices, $1.05, $1.06.
Most places. We've been at this price for quite a while, but
Carlton Brown is another competitor of Irving's. His family runs C.N. Brown, a chain of gas stations and Big Apple convenience stores all over New England. And he says prices are low throughout the region, in part because of Irving.
Irving will come into a market and take a survey, and they will match the lowest price in that town. And they'll stay right with whoever's low in that town.
Brown says in every Maine town, Irving will match any low price it comes across. But more than that, Irving will often move the price even lower. For example, in Freiburg, where Irving was selling for $1.09, both stations across the street were at $1.12. And in Manchester, John Babb says his coastal station was selling gas at $1.05 only because it was being forced to by price cutting at this Irving station up the road.
I mean, are you the price setter around here?
No, we consider ourselves a price follower. We believe we have to compete with everybody, and we have to do a better job at it if we're going to gain your business.
But you're not the one who's driving the price down to $1.04, $1.03.
No.
Low prices generated by Irving, and it's not just in Maine. Irving also has a network of stations in New Hampshire, with those posting low prices as well.
There's a few more around Concord. They seem to have taken over mobile gas stations. But I like them. I like the stores, and I like their prices, and they're very convenient, always open.
What are the prices like?
Usually pretty low.
In fact, Irving has developed a reputation as a price leader in the U.S. that runs all the way to Massachusetts. In Haverhill, its first and so far only station in that state. In total, we looked at Irving prices in 20 communities in both Canada and the U.S., and with everything expressed in Canadian cents per liter, not including taxes, the 6 best prices all turned out to be American. In fact, so did the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th best prices. Halifax, the lowest maritime price, showed up only in 12th. St. John, home to Irving Oil, didn't show up until 17th, with Charlottetown posting the worst price of all. And overall, the average of those U.S. prices at 27.6 cents a liter was 3.5 cents less than the average maritime price.
18 hours sailing.
Kenneth Irving says it takes 18 hours at sea to get a load of gasoline from St. John to Boston, and yet Irving will sell gasoline more cheaply on the streets of Massachusetts than product that took 18 minutes to deliver anywhere in St. John. It's strange, to be sure, but given the economics of the Irving's giant refinery in combination with Irving's giant position within the Maritime's gasoline business, it does make some sense for them.
What are the pitfalls of being big?
Arthur Irving runs Irving Oil, and although initially he wanted his son Kenneth to do all the talking for the company for the purposes of this project, he couldn't resist telling off a reporter who suggested to him that Irving's market size inside the Maritimes might be a little big.
Well, big, what are you talking about? The thing is that market share. The thing is, if you have 10% of the market down here in the oil business, you know what happens to you? You go broke. If you don't know, that means you're bust. So you're good to nobody.
Arthur Irving says the company's maritime business is crucial. Irving sells nearly 2 million liters of gasoline in the region every day. And although that's a huge share of the entire market, it's just enough to keep the refinery at peak production. And according to Arthur Irving, the entire company from going broke. Consequently, Irving watches over its market share in the Maritimes like a hawk, and it spends millions to maintain and defend it.
In the military, some countries cover the ground with troops and others cover it with fire. Irving would cover it with sights, cover it with troops.
Mike Budd says one of the unique things about Irving in the Maritimes is the sheer number of stations it operates. In New Brunswick alone, 40% more stations than its nearest competitor. For example, on the west side of St. John, there are 9 gasoline stations, 1 Esso, 1 Shell, 1 Co-op, 1 Canadian Tire, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Irvings. It's a presence that guarantees customers, but it's expensive. And Kenneth Irving says although the company may charge less for its gas in the United States, in the end it's not making any more money from its high prices at home.
If we were to take New Brunswick, which is a competitive marketplace, and compare it with a state like New Hampshire, and we were to subtract all the costs that are associated with doing business in those marketplaces, making sure, of course, that we're dealing with taxes and so on, which are the substantial piece of the cost differential, what you'd end up with for reinvestment in all those competitive markets is essentially the same.
Irving needs big markups on gas in the Maritimes to help pay for its expensive retail network, and it needs that network to help ensure its dominating market share, and it needs that market share to help keep output at the refinery high. But that's a strategy that only works as long as competitors are also willing to charge high prices, or in the case of smaller competitors, at least afraid enough not to.
It's sort of fighting the schoolyard bully, you know. Do you take him on his turf or do you fight him on your own? You know?
Dave Collins runs Wilson's Fuels out of this tiny office in Halifax.
Morning, Wilson.
Wilson's share of the Maritime gasoline business now runs at about 3%, due largely to price cutting.
If you can lower your price and you can get, you know, you take a 10% earnings cut and you can increase your volume 15%, then you're making more money.
Wilson's whole strategy is to cut prices to build its business, a strategy that 2 years ago provoked Irving into starting a series of devastating price wars that nearly ran Wilson's out of business.
He was the acknowledged leader on the way down to, you know, levels of 39 cents.
That was in Truro?
He did that in Truro, and then he stepped over the Stewiacke market, and then he did it in Elmsdale. He then did it in Lower Sackville, and he left Halifax. We had a period of time here for about 4 weeks where Halifax was 50-some-odd cents. And right next door, which is, you know, in Sackville, which is a contiguous market. I mean, you can't tell. The houses don't stop between Halifax and Sackville. It was 39 cents. But we don't have any outlets in Halifax.
Eventually, Wilson's had to take its price cutting underground and now offers gas for less coupons to give customers a deal without antagonizing competitors.
What's our choice? We're not marketing in Singapore, Texas, or some other marketplace. We can't give it up here. This is our core market. This is home. We have to be extremely competitive based on whatever market share that we've been able to establish.
Kenneth Irving won't say one way or another how his company has dealt with Wilson's, only stating that Irving has to compete, but Mike Budd says that given the market share Irving has at stake in the Maritimes, Wilson's story is not surprising.
If I was looking at this market today, I sure wouldn't get that warm feeling that I could come in here, set up shop, and make much money, because I suspect as soon as I came in and set up shop, the prices would come down around my ears.
Irving cuts prices in the U.S. to gain customers and market share, but in the Maritimes it has market share already and benefits instead from big markups which help to pay for its expensive retail network. It represents two different market approaches with two different results for consumers, but for Irving it's all done for one reason: to keep the refinery humming along.
Utilization is one of those key performance indicators that we do exceptionally well at. You know, we're fully utilized, and that really does have a significant impact on the performance of the plant.
High output has a significant impact on the performance of the plant. And for Irving Oil, the plant comes first. In a way that's good for the region because the refinery does mean millions in jobs and economic activity that simply wouldn't exist without it. But the refinery also costs millions in the way it contributes to the region's high gasoline prices. Prices that have Maritimers paying substantially more for their own homemade gasoline than Americans do.
You're paying 2 or 3 cents a liter, a billion liters or 2 billion liters. It's a lot of money, an awful lot of money.
Mike Budd says in the end, because annually Maritimers consume over 2 billion liters of gasoline, the bill for a 3-cent a liter premium on gas would top $60 million for the year, with Irving in line for about a third of that. It's an enormous cost for consumers to be paying, no matter what the region's economy may be getting in return. Robert Jones, CBC News, St. John.
What do the Irvings do with all of their money? You might be surprised where some of it ends up. That story when we come back.
This year we decided not to do our taxes.
We're never going to do our taxes again.
We were paying way too much tax. Our situation was getting far too complicated, and we decided that we had better things to do.
We just said, forget it.
And that's when we decided to, you know, get out of the country for a little while.
Hyundai just slashed the cost of driving with the Prime Cuts event. If you hunger for extra value, get into the sporty 98 Accent, now with 0 down, 0 security deposit, and freight and PDS included for only $178 a month. Or get a Prime Cut deal on the roomy 98 Elantra family sedan, now with $850 down, 0 security deposit, and freight and PDS included for only $198 a month. So get a deal that's a cut above. Prime Cuts at your Hyundai dealer right now.
Smell anything?
A wet dog.
Regular air fresheners just disguise odors. No.
Potpourri and a wet dog.
Wizard Odor Neutralizer doesn't just disguise odors, it neutralizes them, so the air smells fresh and clean.
Could you do that again?
Wizard Odor Neutralizer. Don't disguise, neutralize.
He's still here.
Darling, what is this? Sanigel? Not just for toilets? What?
Sanigel bathroom cleaner, because a Sanaclean bathroom says a lot about you.
Welcome back. Earlier this week, we heard Arthur Irving say he only keeps enough money in his pocket to buy a hamburger. That was a classic example of how the Irvings view their wealth. Throughout this series, again and again, we've heard the Irvings describe themselves as small players in the business world. But in fact, the Irvings are a family of great wealth. But when it comes to charity, they have a reputation for being stingy. The Irvings admit they've been criticized, so they've decided to change. But they've discovered it isn't easy to give away money. Jeff Britt now on the evolution of the Irvings' attitude toward charity.
Here we go. Okay,
There's something different about the Irvings these days.
let her rip.
There's more exposure, more public displays of the family. What they're doing is drawing attention to themselves, and it's not like them.
Jack, get a little
They want people to know about Irving charity. That is what is different. In the past, the charity of the Irvings was almost a secret. No fanfare, no horn blowing, but quiet and low-key. It's the kind of charity that Arthur Irving grew up with.
The world's largest duck head.
His favorite charity is Ducks Unlimited, a wetlands conservation group.
The kids, as you see in this picture, will be able to go and study the whole area, right in the city of St. John.
Irving gets excited talking about his projects, but he withdraws the moment you ask him about his role.
Whose idea was this now?
Well, all of us.
Irving deflects attention. It's as if he doesn't want to take any credit. It's been the Irving way of charity for over 100 years.
The charity of the Irving family is best understood here in their home province of New Brunswick. And yet, it's remarkable how little is actually known. In fact, most people's views of Irving charity are shaped by two stories about Casey Irving, two stories that have become almost legendary.
The bells of St. Jean-Baptiste Church in Bucktouche is the first story. Everyone knew who paid for them, but Casey Irving would not admit it.
You talked to Father Allen, whatever he said. He'd certainly tell you the truth.
The truth was, Irving made many gestures of charity, but they were always one-on-one, always quiet. It was a trait he learned from his parents. You give, but you don't talk about it. But it was Casey Irving's Calvinist background that gave him a sense of duty about helping others. For Irving, it was more useful to create jobs with his money than it was to give it away. His personal giving was private. And so, the church bells became part of the legend of Irving's quiet charity. But there is the other legend that tells a different story of Irving charity. This second story is one the Irvings are uncomfortable with. In the mid-1960s, the University of New Brunswick began construction of its new library. Dr. Colin Mackay was president of the university and a key fundraiser. As a fundraising idea, he suggested the new building should be named the Harriet Irving Library, after Casey Irving's wife. Mackay remembers Irving's reaction to the idea.
And I said to him one day, in this new library, would you agree to have it named after Mrs. Irving? And he said to me, well, ask her, which I thought was a very sensible reply. Don't ask me, ask her if you want it named after her, which I did. And she agreed to it. And so that was the name. Now, naturally, we were hoping there would be a contribution from Mr. Irving.
The library got the Irving name, but the university didn't get a nickel of Irving money.
He didn't make up his mind what he wanted to do. And so it didn't get done in his lifetime, but it has been done now by his sons.
After 30 years, the sons fulfilled their father's promise with a check for $500,000 for the Harriet Irving Library. But the library story would have a lasting effect on people's views of Irving charity. So much so that the story of the library overshadowed the story of the bells. It is something that has bothered the Irving family. And J.K. Irving says they've decided to do something about it.
Well, we've been endeavoring in the last number of years to open it up a little bit and let people understand what's going on.
Why?
The reason why was that we were starting to get criticism that was coming to our attention that we weren't playing our fair share in the, maybe in the community and being good corporate citizens. We thought that we were doing it, but we found that when we were carrying on the way my father had done it before us, that things were done in a quiet, easy way, and we didn't talk about it. But and some of our employees wondered, you know, maybe we should be doing this or doing that. So we said, maybe we should change our ways, which we did do and have done. And now we're more open and they're letting people know what we're doing to some extent, and to a greater extent, I should say. And for that reason, it was the old way. I think it was just as gratifying as far as we're concerned, but maybe the new way is, we'll see.
Jack, come on over here.
J.K. Irving and his brothers Arthur and Jack are awkward with photo opportunities.
A1, everybody. Right.
But the brothers have agreed to become more public, and so they've forced themselves to do it.
Jack, give me a smiler. That's it.
Look right here.
J.K.'s son J.D. Irving orchestrates the photo op.
There we go. That's it. There we go. Not too deep now, Dad. What? Not too deep.
Unlike his father, J.D. Irving is much more comfortable with the new way of Irving charity. And he saw an opportunity with the new way. Mix charity with education.
Yellow spruce, huh? Yeah.
You're going to look at what's in the box. And
the students at Hillcrest School in Moncton know there's no such thing as a yellow spruce. The Irvings consider this part of their corporate giving. The Forest Discovery Box is in almost every elementary and middle school in New Brunswick.
Oh, a bat.
The box and the Irving Forest Discovery Network are part of an ongoing partnership between J.D. Irving Limited and the New Brunswick Department of Education.
My students probably wouldn't have known what careers were available in forestry in New Brunswick. I didn't know until I became involved with this project.
Welcome to the Irving Forest Discovery Network, IFDN.
A lot of time and money has been spent on this project, and the Irvings proudly point to it as an example of their good works.
It was a tough job, and it took quite a while to get started. But I would say once we get going, we've never looked back, and we're very proud of that. You know, the folks, the men and women in our organization who worked to make that happen, it's a real credit to them.
There you go. This is nothing more than presenting industrial forestry.
David Kuhn is the executive director of the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, an organization internationally recognized for its work on environmental issues.
No, I mean, that's patently absurd to consider this a philanthropic exercise. Clearly, it's in the self-interest of the Irvings to be engaged in this. It's very much a communications, a public relations kind of exercise.
They have determined that it is good PR for the business.
Gordon Floyd is a director with the Canadian Centre of Philanthropy in Toronto. He says these days corporate donations are driven by public relations. And he says when it comes to the Irvings, any activity is better than what was done before.
Most people didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to get a donation out of the Irvings. They were not seen as a family or a business that were carrying their weight in terms of philanthropic giving in Canada. And I think that's why so many of us are pleased to see this evolution in the last few years where they are starting to appear on the scene as donors.
This is where Irving Philanthropy made its public debut, the magnificent St. John Imperial Theatre. 15 years ago, it looked like this. Citizens had launched a campaign to save it, but ran out of money, and the Irvings came to the rescue.
I am very pleased to announce this evening to the Irvings, who have contributed the magnificent sum of $350,000 to the project.
It was the largest Irving gift ever to the city of St. John. Dr. Tom Condon was fundraising chairman. He says the Imperial donation was the beginning of bigger things to come.
The thing that one is repeatedly struck with, I think, in dealing with members of the Irving family, is how interested they are in things being first rate. It has to be well done. It has to be quality.
That emphasis on quality can also be seen here. The Irvings' restoration of the old Loyalist burial grounds in St. John. But it was the story behind the scenes that is perhaps more revealing of the Irvings' new view of charity. The Irvings wanted a statue of Casey Irving erected on the grounds. But that stirred public debates and controversy.
I mean, this is a sacred place. This is a burial ground, and for this to be an honor to their father is totally wrong.
To college money out of the country. So why should he have a statue?
The Irvings backed down on the statue, but still poured millions of dollars into a complete restoration of the grounds. It was seen as a significant step forward in the evolution of Irving philanthropy, and it encouraged others looking for Irving money. For example, the University of New Brunswick now has an active file on the Irvings. Susan Montague says the file makes it possible to exchange fundraising information between the university and the Irving family. But she says it wasn't always that way.
In the past, a lot of the fundraising was done sort of on a guerrilla basis, if I can use that word. Who did you know that could get you in to see the Irvings? Or, you know, was there some special angle that you could present that would capture their attention? It was a hit or miss, a kind of a best guess. If you were lucky, those were the kinds of things that were said about how to approach the Irvings. Now the whole scene really has changed.
Well, times change. And, you know, you have to change with times, otherwise you get left behind. And so change takes place, and you have to accept change. So things change.
The most striking example of that is the establishment of the Irving Foundation. Required by law to file annual tax returns, the foundation allows a rare public glimpse of a small part of the Irving family money. In 1994, the Irvings gave $1 million to the Université de Moncton and $500,000 to the Casey Irving Civic Center in Bathurst. In 1995, the Irvings donated $1 million to the Casey Irving Chemistry Building at UPEI and $1.5 million for the construction of the Casey Irving Hall at the St. John campus of UNB. And in 1996, $500,000 to the Harriet Irving Library, $250,000 to the New Brunswick Museum, and $2.5 million to RCS Netherwood, a private school in Rothsay. For the people who watch such things, the creation of the Irving Foundation is seen as a breakthrough in the Irvings' attitude toward charity. They say the foundation represents the Irvings' fuller understanding of its great wealth and the great responsibility that goes with it. But not everyone holds that view on the foundation, and it's surprising who doesn't.
It's there, but we don't look at it as a foundation.
In fact, there were no grand plans for philanthropy when the Irvings set up the foundation.
Irving Foundation was a creation of the accountants and the auditors. And they thought it was the right thing to do to facilitate what we were doing and so on and so forth. But basically, it gets down to Art, Jack, and myself, and the boys, what we do. And we try to do the right thing, and we'll continue to try and act in a proper manner as far as this philanthropy goes, as long as our companies give us the resources to play a role.
Irvings.
Gordon Floyd says what the Irvings are doing is not unusual.
One typically sees a pattern in the evolution of foundations, particularly family-controlled foundations. And generally the generation that establishes the foundation wants to maintain very, very tight personal control over the granting activities. It's their baby. They created it. They're putting their foot in the water in terms of giving away some of the family fortune. By the time you get to the second generation, if you've got a large, well-endowed foundation, as I'm sure the Irvings will have, then it starts to make sense to have some professional management.
That's what charitable organizations in the Maritimes are waiting for. For now, you still have to find someone who can get you in to talk to whichever brother you think is most influential.
That's not a very good way to do fundraising, and it's probably not a very good way for a company to be philanthropic either. It takes a lot of time and energy on the part of both parties without probably a lot of return to either one. And in many ways it makes sense to have, if not a foundation, then some kind of a corporate donations office, a way by which these things can be handled in a manner that's seen to be sort of fair and rational.
That's the way it's done with most corporations. But J.K. Irving doesn't like comparisons.
You know, we don't pay any attention to what big corporations are doing. We don't compare ourselves to big corporations. We don't compare ourselves to other individuals. We just do what we think is right, and under the circumstances, and what we think should be done. And we're not trying to copy or do what other people do. We do what we think's right.
What was right for the Irvings was a $2.5 million donation to RCS Netherwood. It is the largest gift by far from the Irving Foundation. The brothers decided it would go to their old school, a private school attended by 3 generations of Irvings. In fact, some of the Irving children today can look up to the scoreboard for a message from their grandfathers. For now, it seems Irving good deeds will move along, guided by the older generation. 3 brothers who straddle the chain from the quiet giving of their father, K.C., to modern philanthropy. 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the present, as they struggle with the difficult task of putting back some of what they have taken out. Jeff Britt, CBC News, St. Joe.
Welcome back. Now, tomorrow night, our series on the Irvings continues with a report from Ian Petrie on their quest to own and control land.
Most of us know the Irvings from the products they produce, but the source of the family's wealth lies somewhere else. In the millions of acres of farm and timberland the Irvings have accumulated over the years.
If we're going to continue to grow, and we need to continue to grow, we'll have to, over time, improve our land base as the opportunities come along.
There's a reason the Irvings like owning land, but what does it mean to the region's farmers and foresters?
It's almost impossible to compete with this family for purchasing land.
And it seems to me that almost is what they're preoccupied with, is control.
A healthy economy is one where you've got a diversity of ownership and can maintain it.
Land in the Irvings. It's good business for them, but is it too much in too few hands?
Also tomorrow, how the Irvings get what they want from government. Now, if you want to know more about the Irvings or would like to see the internet version of this series, please visit the MB Now website and click on TV. Watch for our web address on your screen in just a moment. Thanks for watching tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night. You wouldn't think the Irvings need anything more, but they do. They need land, a lot of it, even though they're already the largest private landowners in the Maritimes. Tonight, Ian Petrie looks at what's driving their insatiable appetite for land.
The Irving name is well known in the vast woodlands of the Maritimes and Maine. The trees feed the family's huge lumber and paper mills. And over the last 20 years, the Irvings have moved into the quickly growing French fry business. At the heart of both these industries is land, the one thing no one can make any more of, the one thing the Irvings own a lot of.
You have to have a timber base if you're going to be able to run plants effectively. And if you're going to grow wood for the long term, if you own the land, I think you take better care of it. It's like anything else. If you own it, you look after it, you pay the bills on it, and you take genuine interest in it.
The Irvings own a dozen sawmills in the Northeast, one in Quebec, one in Maine, 2 in Nova Scotia, and the rest in New Brunswick. Then there are the huge pulp, paper, and tissue plants in St. John, Moncton, and Lake Utopia. The key to making these huge investments pay off? Close to 5 million acres of crown-leased and family-owned timberland surrounding the mills. When Casey Irving died in 1992, some reports called the Irvings the biggest private landowners on the continent. Owning land, it's just good business. Paper and lumber mills need thousands of cords of wood every day. The Irving's French fry plants on PEI gobble up more than 15 million pounds of potatoes every week. Having control over the availability and the cost of these raw materials is an industrialist's dream. It was certainly Casey Irving's dream.
It's about maintaining and expanding their own resource base. It's good business for them, but we have to understand that it's down the road, it's a problem for our, for us in general.
I guess the concern for most farmers would be the fact that it's almost impossible to compete with this family for purchasing land. Like, I feel that I can compete with my fellow farmers and let the chips fall where they may. But when it comes to competing with the Irvings, I don't think that I can, and I think most farmers feel likewise.
They're so powerful and they're so big and they have so much control, and it seems to me that that almost is what they're preoccupied with, is control.
The Irvings say their responsibility is to stay competitive in tough global markets. That means continually investing money, lots of it. They'll spend $70 million this year here for new equipment to make better quality paper.
But we're in a capital-intensive business. When you have to spend the capital, you better find a way to spend it or find the money to spend it, because the competition passes you by and you'll just slowly disappear. And that's the problem with a lot of the pulp and paper industry in Canada today. People are not reinvesting. They haven't reinvested in the land. They haven't reinvested in their plants, in their mills, in their people.
Even critics agree the Irvings are a leader in taking care of their timberland. Again, it was Casey Irving who instilled this in his children.
We've had tough years and lean years, but that reforestation program has always stayed in place. And we've planted the trees. We look after our forests, and so we won't run out. And it's starting to pay dividends now. We have enough. We're getting wood. We have wood for our mills. We have wood to expand our mills. We're going to have wood down the road to expand our mills. So it's going to be right.
So Mark, what are we seeing here now?
Well, it's a fairly typical forest in this end of the Missisquash.
Mark Spence likes to show people this piece of Irving timberland. He's one of New Brunswick's 40,000 small woodlot owners, working 1,000 acres with his brother in eastern New Brunswick near Port Elgin.
They've cut this much more carefully than normal. It's a watershed, so that, they've made agreements with the town of Amherst, and you'll see a lot of selection harvesting in here instead of the typical clear-cutting type harvesting, and a lot of shelter wood cutting or strip cutting in these areas. So they've paid a lot more attention to the ecology of this forested area than I think that normally happens in most jurisdictions.
But Spence worries that the Irvings' insatiable appetite for land and the deep pockets to keep on buying it are costing Maritimers something very precious.
If we don't understand that it's a potential problem down the road. The loss of a resource base from the general public is always a problem. It's a problem everywhere in the world.
Other woodlot owners like Greg Kierstead say the Irvings can supply so much of their wood needs from their own operations, woodlot owners like him don't have much leverage. And it's not getting any easier. Mill owners in New Brunswick used to have to buy from regional marketing boards representing the woodlot owners first before they could cut on Crown land. But lobbying by the Irvings and other big companies put an end to this in 1992.
I think that marketing boards are a pain in their side as they see it, and if they can conquer and divide the marketing boards, then they can deal directly with private woodlot owners and pay the price they want, whether it be a fair price or not. And in my estimation, it would not be a fair price.
It looks a lot like the Maritimes, but the history of lost independence here is unique so far. This is the Allagash in western Maine, recognized and protected as one of the most important wilderness areas in the region. But the protection is paper thin. Just 500 feet from the high water mark on either side of the river is owned by the state and can't be touched. A further zone extending to a mile on either side is managed. Virtually all the rest of the area's hundreds of thousands of acres of timber is owned by a half dozen large companies, and it's been cut hard for 50 years. The Irvings, at just over 600,000 acres, is the biggest landowner in western Maine. The Irvings first came here in the 1940s. K.C. and later his sons would come down for the river drives, moving logs to Irving Mills in New Brunswick.
We got a job with him after a while.
78-year-old Clark McBride remembers when the Irvings came to the Allagash. There were a lot of Canadians, I guess, working in the woods here.
Oh, dear Lord, it was, you might say it was all Canadians. Oh, yes, indeed it was, yeah.
And did the people, the local people, resent that?
Well, you better believe it. They resented it very, very much. Yeah.
They saw their jobs being taken
Oh,
away.
we saw our resources going right out the back door, and it's still going. Still going out the back door.
Came through from the border crossing.
Jan Susie worked the woods for the Irvings for 20 years. He and his wife Brenda now run a guiding business in the Allagash. He says it wasn't pretty, but there was money to be made back then.
Any place that was clear cut, back in the days when we were doing it, there was good stand of wood there. So we never left anything. We cut it all flat.
Here in Maine, just like the Maritimes, there's a fierce debate going on over forest practices. 2 years ago, there was a plebiscite that would have completely banned clear cutting. It lost, but even now there's 11 bills being debated in the Maine state legislature. All are trying to get to sustainable levels of cutting by regulating what's going on in the woods. For their part, the Irvings say they don't need anyone to tell them what to do. Their woodlands operation has planted almost 500 million trees in the northeast. Clear cuts are now limited to 35 acres, and the company says only on mature or diseased stands. And where it's possible, like the stand of cedar, they're practicing select cutting, taking mature trees and leaving the rest for another day.
We've got an allowable cut that tells us how many cords or units of wood can be cut every year so that we'll never run out of wood.
And there's one more piece to the Allagash puzzle. It shows up on the walls of a local restaurant. The economy and the culture are rooted in the wilderness close by, but virtually none of it is owned by people who live here. Even they have to pay to use these roads from the spring through the fall. Fay and Lee Hafford knew the Allagash wilderness. He was a park ranger. 72-year-old Fay survives him. She's a local historian trying to preserve in her writings and paintings what was special about the community. She and others say something important has been lost.
You lose your identity, I think is probably the word for it. People move away and the whole thing changes. The face of it changes. It has to. The economy is different now, and once that lumbering has been done around the area, it's moving away, and it's going to keep moving farther away. It's going to take a lot of years before it'll come back.
The thing that is lost, I think, is a lot of the pride that the people had in the us sitting right in the heart of the most vast resources in the East. I think I'm right. And to see it all go,
These are the kinds of lessons Mark Spence hopes Maritimers will pay attention to.
We really have to look at either putting a hold on some of the expansion of some of these larger corporate interests, or at least putting a system in place whereby there's an option for people to sell.
Spence suggests a land trust. People maintain some control over what happens to their land, but can still get some financial benefit out of it. For his part, J.D. Irving says the government should stay out of people's decisions to buy or sell land.
Gee, you know, it's a free world. You don't have to sell it to us, you know, if you don't want to. It's not, there's nothing unusual about that. If somebody wants to sell a piece of land to us or anybody else, that's fine. If they don't, the only thing we'd hope is they manage it.
But even J.D. Irving can't manage everything. Maritime forests are being cut at record levels right now by big companies and small contractors, some say at 50% above what can be sustained. And most of the remote forests in New Brunswick have been harvested. For the Irvings, it's meant bringing their forestry operation close to where people live. This is the Kingston Peninsula, a bedroom community just a short ferry ride away from the stores and jobs in the Irvings' backyard, St. John.
When we learned that J.D. Irving Limited was planning on spraying herbicides, possibly followed by pesticides, some would say almost certainly followed by pesticides, people got pretty upset.
How comfortable are we living with the reality of the chemical reality that we are living with?
Story and others have organized a strong campaign against the Irvings. They know the company has every legal right to do what it wants, but they hope they can persuade it to respect their wishes. J.D. Irving has taken a personal interest in finding a solution and received some harsh criticism from some of the locals.
If we find that the majority of the people on the peninsula who are or are not landowners do not wish to have their land sprayed, will you spray anyway, or will you give in to the wishes of the people?
We're going to come and talk to you, and if you have...
Answer the question, Jim. Answer the question.
No, I tell you, I'm not...
Answer the question. Are you or are you not going to spray if we all...
Are you going to listen to the people? No.
Are you or are you not?
Now look, folks.
Don't come after the question. I need an answer.
We made a mistake. We should have, we went over the last couple of years, we have 8,000 acres in the Kingston Peninsula, and we harvested somewhere in the area of over 1,000 acres in the last couple of years. We shouldn't have done that. We should have been working away quietly, you know, maybe 150 to 200 acres a year, and I probably would have gone along all right. But we learned a lesson on that one.
Irving has agreed to changes. Clear cutting will be limited to less than 200 acres per year, and there will be no spraying for 2 years while researchers look for alternatives to protecting tree plantations.
I guess we felt strongly enough about the dangers that the herbicide could produce, and the lack of enthusiasm for the clear-cutting process, which we've seen in this province for a number of years, that the size of the opponent really didn't matter. And quite frankly, it still doesn't. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong.
I think it comes back to trying to find balance. We're here, you know, this is home. We're living here. We don't want to have a squabble with somebody in the Kingston Peninsula, and or anywhere else. We don't, the folks down in Novanetta. And that's why we're quite prepared to take the time, try and find a balance, try and find a compromise.
When we return, the Irving's land ethic is put to the test on the island. Prince Edward Island farmers fight to limit corporate farming and control.
There are buckets of reasons why the people at Superior are experts. Decades of experience are a guarantee you'll never run out. Appliances. So if you're with Superior, you're sinking in the range. If not, maybe you should give us a call. Woohoo!
This is the latest video game we're developing. And this is our inspiration, my Volkswagen Jetta. Excellent. When you write code for 15 hours straight, you gotta get out. The Jetta's a real German road car with plenty of room for 4 carbon-based life forms. It's got dual airbags, daytime running lights, and side impact door beams. Because in real life, there is no reset button. On the road of life, there are passengers and there are drivers.
If you suffer from heartburn, I suggest you try Gaviscon. Before Gaviscon, I couldn't do this without stomach acid burning up my chest.
Gaviscon starts to relieve the burning and forms a barrier to help keep acid down every time, or your money back, guaranteed.
Do you like great entertainment, the latest news, saving money? Call Fundy today and have television entertainment installed for only $19.95. Movies, sports, 24-hour news and information, plus a whole lot more. But you better hurry because this is a limited time offer. Call today and get comedy, sports, movies, and more installed for only $19.95. For the best value in television entertainment, call Fundy at 1-800-361-FUNDY. But you'd better hurry because this offer won't last forever. Call now.
Just a bathroom tissue, quilted for the softness you need.
What you got, guys?
A 35-year-old male patient class with us mowing the lawn.
Charge 200, please. 200. All clear. This is it. We'll have out to do your chest compressions, ready to defibrillate. I think we got him, folks. Good job.
Look, I've been here for 3 hours. What's the holdup anyway?
In hospital emergency rooms, worst comes first. If you're not sure your medical problem is urgent, you can call your doctor, visit an after-hours clinic, or call the toll-free telecare line from anywhere in New Brunswick.
Hey, their keen business sense is another reason the people at Superior are experts. They know what you need, like 24-hour service, appliance leasing, expert advice. So if you're with Superior, super. If not, phone.
The Irvings may have accumulated millions of acres on the mainland without a fight, but not here on PEI. Islanders take land ownership very seriously. Marion Reed knows why. She's a former politician and lieutenant governor. She lives on a farm that's seen
That's right.
five
Well,
generations of Reeds.
There's no other province in Canada where on one day, July the 23rd, 1767, they gave away every bit of the land on Prince Edward Island, and it was all owned by absentee landlords in England. So the people that came out and settled here, they couldn't get title to their land. We want to be able to have control over our land. We've only had that since 1873.
We want to own our own square of soil, and we don't want anyone else to own beyond, their fair share of our island soil.
So when Robert Irving arrived to take over what was then a bankrupt French fry plant in 1980, farmers like Vernon Campbell were faced with a dilemma.
My initial reaction was positive. Their track record of running refineries and shipbuilding plants and the forestry product, they've got a good track record of putting a good management team in there and the capability and the deep pockets to turn the thing around.
But those deep pockets could also buy up a lot of farmland, and the Irvings had the history to prove they would. Farmers quickly pushed politicians to act, and in 1982, PEI became the first and only province in Canada with a law limiting land ownership. Individuals could own no more than 1,000 acres, corporations no more than 3,000 acres. This wasn't what the Irvings wanted. They've always said they'd like to own enough land to grow about 25% of the potatoes they need for their French fry plant. Including land for a proper 3-year rotation, that translated into about 12,000 acres in the early 1980s. More than 20,000 acres now that French fry production has increased. The Irvings have used the courts, lobbied politicians, tried to get the law changed, with mixed success. For the record, the Irvings say Cavendish Farms has always grown about 2,000 acres of potatoes a season.
So the amount of potatoes we're growing for the plant is minuscule, you know, just very, very small.
Did it ever come to a point where your frustration over land made you rethink whether it was worth being there, whether it was worth expanding the French fry operations?
Oh, you always have poor days, you know, but but the sun always comes up, and we're quite happy with our relationship and our operations on the island.
But the Irving push to own PEI farmland didn't stop with Cavendish Farms. In 1990, Mary Jean Irving, the daughter of J.K. and sister of Robert, burst onto PEI's farming scene. Within months, she bought up millions of dollars worth of prime farmland. She tried to use a loophole in the land law to buy more than 4,000 acres. Outraged farmers demanded the premier of the day, the late Joe Giz, rein the Irvings in.
Gentlemen, good morning. How are y'all doing today?
Don't build your fence after the wolves have gotten in, but do something about it.
The government threatened Irving with court action, and she finally agreed to sell off her excess holdings. 2 years later, the government again refused to allow her to buy another large farming operation in eastern PEI. Irving says all she wanted to do then and now is to have enough land to run a viable farming operation and grow rotation crops to keep the soil healthy.
What are the real issues? Is it really land ownership, or is it land control or land use? And to me, I'm more concerned with the land use on Prince Edward Island for the sake of the industry for the next 20 to 50 years.
But many farmers say what the government took away with one hand, it gave back with the other. A 50% grant to build this 80 million pound potato warehouse in eastern PEI. In western PEI, the government sold the Irvings this bankrupt packing operation with yet more warehouses. Both created new markets for farmers. Potato production has increased by almost 50%. But it's meant something else. The Irvings can buy huge blocks of potatoes right out of the field when they're at their cheapest. So what the Irvings haven't been able to accomplish through owning land and corporate farming, they've done another way. The Irvings have become the largest buyer and sellers of potatoes on PEI. Farmers who sell to Cavendish Farms argue it takes lots of money and business smarts to prosper in the French fry business, and that's what the Irvings have brought to the table.
The French fry business is a ruthless business. They had to undergo years of losses before they could round the corner.
And invest a lot of money, more than $100 million in the last 12 years. The Irvings now have the biggest French fry operation in Canada. But there is potential for a big payoff. Growth in the French fry business is enormous. Huge markets for fast food restaurants in burgeoning Asian economies.
I think Asia is an opportunity. I mean, again, freight always plays a role, I mean, from a cost factor, but there's a big growth market there. And the fast food chains, they're expanding in the world today, as you know, constantly.
In a conference room here at Cavendish Farms, Robert Irving orchestrated a major sale for the company. Across the table from him were executives from Wendy's, the big fast food restaurant. Now, the story goes that Irving came into the room, tapped his pencil on the table a few times and said he wouldn't end the meeting until there was a deal. And here's where the Irvings really shine. He said there was no board of directors to go back to. He could make the deal right then and there. The Wendy's executives were impressed with the style. What sealed the deal was the price, more than $10 million less than what they were paying before. Cavendish Farms now sells French fries to 2,000 Wendy's restaurants down the U.S. East Coast.
The deal he made with them probably saved them $10 or $11 million on their French fry requirements. Did you have to make that kind of deal in order to get the contract?
Well, I think, again, there's a threshold in every deal, and you have to know how far you can push that threshold and how far the customer will go. And then you have to make a decision. And we made a decision that we both could live with, and we're into our second year now, and it's been working out well.
But this marketing success has had consequences. Farmers are now faced with lower prices for next year's crop.
Well, it's sort of the ripple effect. you know, once Wendy's got a deal on fries, well, then McDonald's and Burger King and KFC, all the rest of them want at the same price, so that their suppliers, you know, the other major French fry companies, they had to lower their price. And then they moved back farther down the line to their raw product suppliers, the farmers, and, you know, they're looking for cuts in prices from them. And, you know, it's sort of a domino effect, and now we're being told that, you know, we've got to take a reduction because, you know, the farmers out west are taking a reduction in price. So it's really a vicious circle.
What about future expansion for Cavendish Farms? The Irvings have cleared some forest land in New Brunswick, just on the other side of the Confederation Bridge, to grow potatoes. But many in the company say drainage is very poor, and most of it isn't suitable for cropping. It's looking more likely that expansion will be somewhere else, a place with no restrictions on buying land, somewhere the Irvings have gone before, Maine. And as happened so often before, the first step is buying land. This is the Houghton farm near Easton. Houghtons have farmed this land for 4 generations and done well in the seed potato business. John and Tim Houghton have made a difficult decision to sell out. It came after a visit from J.K. and Robert Irving, who wanted to buy their 1,600-acre operation, lock, stock, and barrel.
Well, there are going to be a lot of things you're going to miss. You know, we had some real good customers. And had some good employees, and, you know, it's like family. You know, they've been here for years.
What will you not miss about it?
The risk.
I guess we just knew if they decided to do it, they had the resources, and that was a big factor, that somebody with the resources to do it.
Robert Irving says from where he sits, Maine holds promise.
As you know, Maine was one of the largest growing state for potatoes. And today, of course, it's fell on some hard times, but there's still a lot of potato land up there. And we decided that we'd buy some land there and see what we could do with growing potatoes in that region.
And will you be looking at other farms, buying other farms as well?
Yes, we've bought some other farms as well.
It's a cold February evening in Caribou, Maine. More than 100 farmers have come out for the annual meeting of the Agricultural Bargaining Council. And the Irvings are on many farmers' minds. Organizers had asked Robert Irving to be the guest speaker. He declined, saying it was premature. What all are hoping for is that the Irvings will build a new French fry plant in Maine, and many say if they have to buy up some farms to get comfortable with expanding there, that's okay.
Well, I have heard some concern about it, but myself, I think it just shows that they have an interest here, and if there's an interest here, maybe we ought to kind of go along and cultivate that just a little bit. Hopefully it'll reward us in the end.
Continuing to expand, buying more land. The Irving wheels just keep turning. But many Maritimers think it's time to ask some hard questions.
Is land a commodity or is it a resource? Now, if it's a commodity, you can sell it to the highest bidder. If it's a resource, you have to retain it for future generations.
The Irvings say they can't afford to be too philosophical. They see themselves as small players in a global marketplace, as the catalyst to turn this region's natural resources into wealth and jobs.
If we're going to continue to grow, and we need to continue to grow, we'll have to, over time, improve our land base as the opportunities come along.
Ian Petrie, CBC News, on the Kingston Peninsula.
When we come back, the relationship between the Irvings and government. Just how does it work? We'll be right back.
This is the latest video game we're developing, and this is our inspiration, my Volkswagen Jetta. Excellent. When you write code for 15 hours straight, you gotta get out. The Jetta's a real German road car with plenty of room for 4 carbon-based life forms. It's got dual airbags, daytime running lights, and side impact door beams, because in real life, there is no reset button. On the road of life, there are passengers and there are drivers.
life with all of your being. There is joy to be found every day. Taste life and its good things, the pleasure that food brings. With Sobeys, come on, taste life. Taste life for a healthy tomorrow. And let food be the way to brighten your day. With Sobeys, come on, taste life.
Choices. That's what it's all about. The open road, freedom itself. It all comes down to choices.
Shorney's Optical incredible 2-for-1 event. Choose from up to 1,200 fashionable frames.
Born to be wild. Or sell mutual funds.
Shorney's Optical. Incredible eyewear for incredible people.
Do you like great entertainment? The latest news? Saving money? Call Fundy today and have television entertainment installed for only $19.95. Movies, sports, 24-hour news and information, plus a whole lot more. But you better hurry because this is a limited time offer. Call today and get comedy, sports, movies, and more installed for only $19.95. For the best value in television entertainment, call Fundy at 1-800-361-FUNDY. But you'd better hurry because this offer won't last forever. Call now.
Whether it's forestry, agriculture, oil, or shipbuilding, the Irvings pay the wages of tens of thousands of Maritimers in all three provinces. And jobs have been the #1 political issue in this region for decades. That can give the Irvings considerable clout with governments, local and provincial. Here's Sarah Fraser now with a report on the sometimes smooth, sometimes rough relationship between the politicians and the Irvings.
A gray afternoon in late February. They're painting signs and loading the shelves and lining up the paint cans. 716. Opening day is less than 2 weeks away. Everything has to be just right when the first customers walk in the doors here at the new Kent Building Supply store in Dartmouth. Because this is no ordinary store. At 140,000 square feet, it'll be the largest building supply store east of Montreal and the flagship of the Irving's Kent chain. But according to its neighbors, it shouldn't be here at all.
The entire neighborhood was involved in this, and in the final analysis, about 450 people who had signed their names protesting this development.
Andrew Crook is one of the Dartmouth residents who packed city council meetings and public hearings to make sure their objections were heard.
One, that it was a monstrous development, the size of 3 football fields. Initially promoted as a hardware store with a retail hardware store and a garden center. And now I think if you pan this correctly, you're going to see that it's no longer a retail hardware store, it's a wholesale warehouse. And that includes a lumber yard, all under one roof. We were also concerned about the fact that City Council didn't address some of the other concerns, such as alternate uses for the land. Now, you must remember this was initially park and recreation and R3. And what is it now? It's been rezoned for Kent into a commercial development. And we felt that was contrary to the initial planning for the area. But nevertheless, it went through City Council and was approved.
An agreement or contract will override the zone.
So how did the Irvings get the zoning changed? Well, when they came to Dartmouth City Council, they put on a show, the likes of which had never been seen here before.
Probably I'd never seen such a presentation and such determination. And I had worked for the provincial government for a number of years, and we were always involved in that sort of, projects. But this determination and assurance was something I'd never seen before.
Clint Schofield was one of the few Dartmouth aldermen who spoke out against the project, but even he admired the Irving show.
It must have been a very important project. I'm sure it was, as every project probably would be with them, because those members of the Irving family actually came to the public meeting and assured the people that they would do everything that they could possibly do to deal with the traffic problems. They were sure in their mind that their project was good for the area, good for them, good for the community.
But the owners of this upscale apartment development didn't want a building supply warehouse next door. They hired Halifax lawyer Jack Innes to make their case.
We were being confronted with the position that there were 100+ jobs, that many of those jobs would be for younger people. We were simply pointing out that if you create 100 or more jobs in a retail facility like this, designed to take business away from other retail facilities, obviously there may not be a job for job loss, but there's certainly going to be an adverse effect on the other side. So you may create 100, you might lose 50. There's only so many jobs in this particular area.
Irving was trying to get a permit to build a building. Now people try and get permits to build buildings every day. That's a fact of life. We happen to be down there locally, and I suppose that got a little more attention than normal, because perhaps it was us, our organization. But if you go across the country today, that's not unusual to have people objecting to things. That's quite standard.
J.D. Irving's the man in charge of Kent Building Supplies.
We think, as in a lot of times when you get a little controversy, it's about balance. How do you get balance, and how do you find out what people are concerned about? And if people are reasonable and try and work with you, that's our job, is to make sure that we're fully reasonable and try and work with everybody and put balance in things.
The Irvings call it balance. When it works, everyone goes away happy. But what happens when it doesn't? Just ask Pat Binns and his conservative cabinet in PEI. Soon after the Binns government came to power in 1996, Mary Jean Irving came looking for money to expand her master packaging box plant in Borden-Carleton. The previous Liberal government, under Catherine Colbeck, had been glad to loan Irving money to build her box plant, but Binns said no.
It's always a tough call, and the question was, what is the real job gain here? And we were concerned at the time that there could be a job loss by providing further assistance for an expansion of that plant, a job loss in another plant on the island. So we don't have the benefit of having a crystal ball and being able to see into the future. You make your decision at the time based on the information you have, and you move on from there.
We went to the Prince Edward Island government. We worked with them. We tried to negotiate. We weren't succeeding. Once I was told no, then I made my move to New Brunswick. Up until that point, I had no discussions with New Brunswick at all, and I had no intentions of going to New Brunswick. And never dreamed that I would be in New Brunswick. That's where I've ended up. Perception-wise, simply all I can say to people is that we negotiated here first, and once the answer was no, then I approached New Brunswick.
We said our job is to create jobs in New Brunswick, use every stick we can to make more jobs. That fell in our strategy. We said if PI doesn't want to do it, which is their decision, then we'd like to take a look at it.
Francis McGuire is Deputy Minister of Economic Development for New Brunswick. The box plant proposal was exactly what his department was looking for.
It's a wonderful project. It's absolutely what we've been doing. It was the fourth in the series. We did the Majesta plant, we did the Chipman plant, we did the Boys Town plant, and now we do it in the box plant. And if they have any other projects, we would love to see them. We want every single one.
And what about the possibility of two neighboring provinces competing for the same jobs?
When a sister province says no to a project, it becomes fair game. So there is no sense of us competing. If go back again and remember, the PEI government said, no, we have a policy of not doing this. We said, well, we don't have that policy, we're glad to do it. But it was turned down flat by the PEI government first.
So what's the future for the 30 workers in the Borden-Carleton master packaging plant when this plant in Dieppe opens?
When our operation gets underway and stabilized in Moncton, we will move 2 of our lines from Borden 2 months, and so we will be downsizing here.
And how many jobs will that eliminate?
Half of the number of people that are here at presently.
Downsizing? I mean, what can you say? I mean, if your place was going to downsize, you'd have the same kind of animosity or hard feelings toward whoever was in control of things.
I'm going to take a look at it. Come over here with me. Oh, already. Get that back up there right now. What am I going to do with you? Huh?
Best job I've had. I used to work in seasonal work, and I lived away from the island for 10 years, and I came home 5 years ago, and it was hard to find work. And we went through a lot to get the jobs here, and you know, you're rewarded for your hard work and your digging up your resume and a lot of interviews for the job, and they treat us good here. They really do.
I was hoping to have a future here, but it's hard to say what's going to happen now.
Who do you blame?
In my mind, I blame the government. If they had gone through with the loan that Irvings had asked for, I think it would have created a lot more jobs on the island. It's very seldom that an Irving company expands and fails. Like, Irvings employ a lot of people, and there's a lot of potential here.
Bottom of the bundles now. Pulling it tighter, or what's the difference?
Just good done.
Huh?
Good done each. But Pat Binns stands by his decision.
Provincial interests and corporate interests are somewhat different. You're really dealing with two, in some cases, quite different interests. We're all interested in job creation. We're all interested in economic development. But we have to look at it from a slightly different perspective. We have to look at it in terms of what is the overall benefit to the province, where they're looking at it from what is the overall benefit to the Irving group of companies.
Money talks, and in the Maritimes, jobs talk even louder.
How you doing today, Jim?
The Irvings say what makes good business sense for them makes good sense for the Maritimes. For Jim and Mary Jean Irving, governments turning thumbs down on new business projects makes no sense at all.
Well, I think I could see the writing on the wall from the way things were sort of panning out at that time. But I was very disappointed, and I felt very badly for the unemployed in Prince Edward Island, that this operation would have given them an opportunity for the town of Borden. I think it was, you know, a real positive step since the opening of the bridge here, and I think it would have been an asset for this community.
Because at the end of the day, if everything is no, what are we going to have here in Atlantic Canada? We'll have no jobs, we'll have no tax base, and we need activity. That's what we need in Atlantic Canada and across Canada in order to really support all the programs and that make the country run.
So when it's all said and done, what's the bottom line? Well, when the Irvings come to town with the promise of jobs in their back pocket, the door to City Council or a cabinet room will always be open for business. For CBC News, I'm Sarah Fraser.
Now, tomorrow we'll continue our series with a look at the next generation of Irvings, the generation poised to take over the family business in the years to come. Darrell McIntyre reports on who they are, where they fit in the corporate structure, and how they plan to keep the business on track.
It's the biggest challenge any family business will ever face, succession, passing the company from one generation to the next. The Maritime's most successful business family knows that, but the Irvings think they're ready for the challenge. In fact, they say they've been preparing all their lives.
And I can remember the shaking hand drill that my grandfather used to make my brother and I do before he took us through the paper mills or the refinery on the weekend. We'd have to practice looking at him in the eye and shaking his hand and saying, how do you do? You know, it was important to, for us to be very polite and respectful of anyone we met along the way.
But starting early is no guarantee the handoff will go smoothly. Just a few years ago, Maritimers watched as the region's second most successful business family, the McCains, waged a public battle over succession. Can the Irvings avoid a similar fate? Watch Unlocking the Mystery tomorrow night.
Also tomorrow, have the Irvings been good or bad for the Maritimes? We'll take on that big question in the final part of our Irving series. Now, if you'd like more information on the series and on the Irvings, visit our MB Now website and click on TV. You'll see our web address in just a moment. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow night. Good night.
The future seems a little unclear. For most of his career, he's worked at one of the family's two biggest companies, Irving Oil and J.D. Irving Limited. And it's unlikely he'll hold the top job at either of them. J.D. seems the natural candidate to succeed his father as president of J.D. Irving.
Jim, you've been in the business here 22 years? 24 years. 24 years. You know, it's not just starting the business. You've been around. You're running the business here now.
In fact, he's even named after the company's founder, his great-grandfather, James Durgival Irving. And it's probably no coincidence that Kenneth is named after his grandfather. K.C. Irving founded Irving Oil, and now Kenneth is poised to succeed his father as its president.
That would be my ultimate career goal, yes.
You work at Irving Oil, Kenneth works at Irving Oil, and Arthur Lee works at Irving Oil. What kind of plan is there in place to decide who's going to be the guy in control at the end of the day when the succession is complete?
Well, we don't... I was fortunate to be at the oil company for almost 10 years. And I think it comes down to who would like to do what, how they'd like to do it, and what their skill set is. And in working together, which we do, I mean, because we have common goals, that kind of decision is, in the end, can become somewhat self-evident. And that's something we're all comfortable with.
Maybe so, but not having enough top leadership roles has wrecked other family businesses.
But it seems to me that conceptually the difficulty arises when you've got cousins, when you've got uncles who are trying to make decisions about their children and their brother's children. And it's not even so much a matter of how you fare, it's how you seem to be fair. Would it seem fair to a son to decide that it was a cousin who was, or a nephew who was better? Would it seem fair to the nephew to decide that your son was better? And the answer is probably not. You know, just human nature being what it is.
That's still one of the sticking points of figuring out who takes over as CEO?
I think that's a more complex question than you think.
Case in point, the McCains. 4 years ago, New Brunswick's second most successful industrialist family waged a very public battle over succession. A battle that eventually led to a split, with Wallace McCain going his separate way.
And that should be a very salutary lesson to any large business. I don't think anyone would want to put themselves through what the McCains have gone through. And while that is not, it's not easy to avoid that, it's really worth spending a lot of time and effort to avoid it.
But Robert Irving thinks his family has that base covered too. J.K.'s second son, he says the Irvings have one thing the McCains didn't.
We're so diversified. I mean, everybody has his area of responsibility, and everybody's focused on trying to make that business better, and with everybody's help support, I mean, we'll keep winning, we keep building. I mean, our strength, of course, is united, and I think that we all understand that. We all have to be united, working together to make the whole Irving business that much more successful.
Some more to the changes that we want to look at in this machine here.
As a second son, Robert may not be in line for the top job at J.D. Irving Limited, but in this family, the runner-up prizes aren't bad either. At 42, Robert already runs an impressive cluster of companies: Cavendish Farms, Midland Trucking, SMT, Acadian Lines, and Irving Tissue. Even the youngest of the young Irvings in the family business has lots on his plate. Arthur Lee is Arthur Irving's second son.
For the transactions with NCR on the back office system here, right? It's not exactly what it should be. You're going to go up to Montreal with Jean?
We're going to Montreal to look at some restaurants, and then we're going to...
How are you?
Arthur Jr. works in sales at Irving Oil and as part of the management team running the family's restaurants and truck stops, including this, the biggest and newest one, in Salisbury, New Brunswick.
The reason for the location is we're 13 hours outside of Montreal, and that's where you finish up on your logbooks before you have to shut down. So it's kind of strategic, Moncton being a hub and so on, so all the trucks come in here and wait.
At just 32 years old, he's even set up a North American billing system for Irving credit cards.
All these dots signify places where they can buy fuel on our credit card. About 30% of our transactions will be in Ontario, and in 2-3 years, 50% of our transactions will be U.S. based.
But when it comes to the presidency of Irving Oil, Arthur Jr. has a practical outlook.
Well, my brother's senior to me. He's 4 years older than myself, and with his expertise and so on, I would expect my brother to be, if you want, the president. But I'd work closely with him in any regard.
Arthur, after we go home tonight, Arthur's got to go to Houston. He's got to be at that meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and he'll be back, and I'll meet him in Boston tomorrow at 9 o'clock. He's going to be successful. I'm going to do something else that's going to be successful tomorrow. We'll both talk about it tomorrow night in Boston. See you at the Harborside Hotel around 10 o'clock.
I'll be there.
Mary Jean is J.K. Irving's third oldest child. Like her cousins and brothers, her memories of the family business also go back a long way.
I did visit the mills with my father, or go around with him on his on weekends sort of thing, and discussions in the home. There was always phone calls and business calls, and so it was just something very naturally that went on.
Today, Mary Jean owns and runs Indian River Farms, one of the largest potato farms in PEI, and Master Packaging, a cardboard box factory.
What are you running here today? Trade right now.
But unlike her brothers and cousins, Mary Jean built the company she operates from the ground up. When it comes to the family outfit, it seems she's not even in the picture.
The Irving Group of Companies is a family-owned business. Originated in Bucktouche, New Brunswick, and founded over 100 years ago, the business was developed through the hard work and dedication of Mr. K.C. Irving. His legacy has been passed on from generation to generation.
But then, in the world of business, it's not unusual for a woman to be left out of the running when it comes to succession.
The most recent figures I've seen suggest that 90% of children who succeed to their parents' business are sons rather than daughters. That's the tradition. Whether or not that's reasonable, I think it certainly isn't. I think it shortchanges the business very much because it really eliminates half the talent and half the ability that you have in the family.
Still, Mary Jean doesn't think her sex has affected her role in the grand scheme of things.
No, I mean, I have my own businesses here on, on Prince Edward Island, and my father's very supportive. He's a terrific mentor. I can't say enough about that. And my brother Robert, he's one of my largest customers. I'm his customer when it comes to the potato end of it. So, no, I don't see it as a problem.
Neither does her father.
I got Mary Jean over the island, and she's doing a job over there, and she's quite a little business lady, and I got full confidence in her, and I think she'll do all right, too.
Even if all the siblings in the business are comfortable with their roles, a leader still has to tread carefully during succession. Remember, in a family company, there may be dozens of people who have no direct role in the business operations, but do have a stake in the company's future and an interest in who gets what.
You can get to situations in which family members don't talk to one another, and not nice.
Preventing that calls for tact and diplomacy.
if you don't have a process which is seen to be fair and reasonable, you may pick the best person and destroy the family doing it. And you know, family's important too. The reason for the business often is the family. And even if the business succeeds with the destruction of the family, you haven't gained much.
But no matter which Irving you ask, they'll tell you they've got that base covered too.
Our focus is on getting the job done, and we talk together. Rob, Kenneth, Arthur, I, John, we travel around together every so often. We all get together, get in a car or get in a plane and go visit some operations, and we'll just talk.
You know, my cousins and I, although we get along very well on a personal and professional level, we're very different people, but because we all run very different businesses, it doesn't pose any issue.
You know, we all have different interests. We all have different skill sets, and by working together, I think we make a pretty good team.
Communication. We talk to one another all the time. We talk with Dad, and Dad tells us what he thinks. And I talk to Kenneth, and he asks me about things like, from a sales perspective of what we're doing.
Support your sister, support your brother, and always back each other. And I think with that philosophy and upbringing, with those deep roots, I mean, we're going to stick together.
My father and mother have brought us up to have a sense of caring for one another. My brothers and my sister have been brought up, you know, we love each other, and I'm interested in what they're doing and how they're doing, and we communicate quite often with each other. And I think as long as everyone's happy and doing what is fulfilling to them, I think that's the key.
They've got to have had family discussions about that. I think they have agreed on what will be said publicly about that. And that's not too surprising. You know, I mean, family businesses are not the most open organizations in the world for people who come asking questions. And I think succession is a particularly difficult subject to handle. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they've said, yes, we're working on it, everything is fine, the future lies ahead. Or, you know, that's a perfectly expected answer. It would surprise me if things were that absolutely cut and dried, or that everybody shared exactly the same perception about that inside the company. But that's what succession problems are all about, and succession planning is all about.
For now, the senior Irvings are still in control of the family outfit, and it's business as usual. Business the way K.C. Irving taught both generations to do things.
I tell you, we're very fortunate. I think from that point of view, because we have very good crop coming up.
Good crop, eh?
It's good crop coming up. And
coming along. That's but we're now at a crop, eh? We'll have a clear cut here in a minute. Eh?
But you know, I really think, in my heart, the next generation is going to do a better job than we did. And I really think that, and I hope that, and I think it's going to happen.
I would think that we will leave it in good shape, better than when we took over, and we'll get the next generation well started. We'll give them the right training, get them the right start, so when I'm my father's age, or Rob's my father's age, we'll be sitting here, and there'll be someone sitting here saying, you know, telling you about somebody else about building straight roads and planting straight trees, and we'll make sure she's still going right ahead. And that's about the best thing I think we can do.
For CBC News, I'm Darrow McIntyre in St. John, New Brunswick.
When we come back, the last part of our Irving series. Have the Irvings been good or bad for the Maritimes? Stay with us.
This is the latest video game we're developing, and this is our inspiration, my Volkswagen Jetta. Excellent. When you write code for 15 hours straight, you gotta get out. The Jetta's a real German road car with plenty of room for 4 carbon-based life forms. It's got dual airbags, daytime running lights, and side impact door beams, because in real life, there is no reset button. On the road of life, there are passengers and there are drivers.
At Altamira, if one of our funds isn't performing, we have to answer some tough questions.
Yours.
I just started my family. Will this be too risky?
Let's focus on long-term growth.
Markets go up and markets go down, but good or bad, you can call us and get information that comes directly from our fund managers. Can your investment company say that? Altamira, helping you take control.
Choices.
That's what it's all about.
The open road. Freedom itself. It all comes down to choices.
Shorney's Optical incredible 2-for-1 event. Choose from up to 1,200 fashionable frames.
Born to be wild. Or sell mutual funds.
Shorney's Optical. Incredible eyewear for incredible people.
How about $3 for an Audi S6 Quattro or an Infiniti Q45? How does $3 sound for a Mercedes E320? What about $3 for a Cadillac DeVille, a BMW 528i, or a $60,000 top prize? The cash or the car? The choice is yours with new luxury cars from Auto Plus. See your lottery dealer today. Sample our luxury line.
Who do you shower with? Someone I trust. Introducing Carey Moisturizing Body Wash. A gentle conditioning cleanser soothes, moisturizes, and protects against dry skin. New Carey Moisturizing Body Wash. Shower with a friend. For my one and only skin, I only trust Carey. Dermatologist recommended Carey works on 3 levels to soothe, moisturize, and protect against dryness. Original and fast-absorbing Carey for your one and only skin.
Welcome back. For the past 4 nights, our series, Unlocking the Mystery, has put the Maritime's most powerful family under a microscope and looked at it in a way it's never been looked at before. Tonight, in the series' final installment, we're putting that microscope away, and we're asking a very big question. Have the Irvings been good or bad for the Maritimes? This is Union Street in downtown St. John. It was on this street 15 years ago that I got my first good look at that powerful, extraordinary emotional relationship New Brunswickers have with the Irvings. I had been in the province about a week. My cameraman and I were on an assignment. We were traveling down this street, and all of a sudden, he hit the brakes, pulled a U-turn, pulled up to this curb, and said, "There's KC." I looked out of the window across the street, and this is what I saw. An elderly man wearing a black beret walking along the street. My cameraman's response was part awe, part reverence. It was the first time I saw the deep emotional response many Maritimers have to the Irvings.
But when somebody from outside takes us on, boy, they picked on the wrong outfit. We'll defend you, we'll defend the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, every time. And that's it. So it's straight up with us. You get what you see.
But not all Maritimers like what they see. While a lot of people applaud the Irvings, some people are holding their applause. And there's one factor causing both reactions: the size of the Irving business empire. There's not another one like it in the country. It's a collection of companies together worth more than New Brunswick's annual budget. People who admire the Irvings appreciate its corporate dimensions because that bigness gives the empire clear sailing to create more jobs in a part of the country where jobs are badly needed. The forest industry is a good example of that. There are quite a few companies working in the industry,
They're either sawmills or pulp mills. But the Irvings are a different story. They've got sawmills and they've got pulp mills. And they've also got something else. A plant that makes tissue, 400 workers. A plant that makes toilet paper and napkins, hundreds of people work there. There are plants that produce special order lumber for a growing export market. What it all boils down to is this. Irving creates more jobs per tree than any other company working in the woods. And it can do that because it's as big as it is. It has the capital, it has the clout, it has the size. Many Maritimers are grateful for that. Vernon Campbell is one of them. He grows potatoes on Prince Edward Island for Irving-owned Cavendish Farms.
But we here in PEI, the potato industry, in my opinion, is better off today because of their presence rather than worse off.
Vernon Campbell's way of thinking is the way a lot of Maritimers think about the Irvings. And for those who don't share that view, Campbell has a question.
Are you much happier getting your fuel from some other company that doesn't have a presence here in the Maritimes, that maybe doesn't have a refinery, doesn't have the distribution and the trucking jobs, the manufacturing jobs, the service jobs?
The economy, like nature, abhors a vacuum. The point being that if Irving Oil wasn't selling you gasoline, another company would be glad to. But would the other company build a refinery? Would it build the ships to feed the refinery? And would it bother planning and constructing a lubricant plant? Chances are it wouldn't. The Irving empire creates opportunities and operates businesses inside the Maritimes foreign multinationals wouldn't bother with, and local companies wouldn't have the money to do. It's safe to say there are hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs that exist here, only because Irving created them. But that size, that wealth, and that power comes with some unique concerns, especially where consumers are involved.
We would here have an element of market power.
Christian Marfels is an economics professor at Dalhousie University. He's adding up the market shares of the four biggest players in the maritime gasoline business.
67, 77, 82% of the market. 82% of the market, 4 firms only. So a classical oligopoly.
Marfel says in economics, being big can mean trouble for consumers. It limits competition. And as we've seen in our series, it can mean higher prices for maritime gasoline.
What we get literally from a concentrated market is a kind of rigidity. Rigidity meaning, that firms are very reluctant to literally challenge their competitors because they know the retaliation is there.
Marfels believes being big can create imbalances in the economy. That's something the unions dealing with the Irvings know all too well. It's 1990. The workers at one of the 2 Irving pulp mills in St. John are out on strike. They stay on strike for 10 months before they give in, something the company would never do.
Never give up.
The Irvings take that attitude into their next fight. It's 2 years later, another strike, this one at the refinery. It lasts 27 months, but the result is the same. The union surrenders to Irving power. From the refinery in St. John to the shipyard in Shelburne, Irving employees know all too well who's in charge. In the Maritimes, Irving is the dominant, enthusiastic team no one can beat. The unions know that, so does the government.
Honorable Minister?
It's 1995. Out of the blue, the McKenna government decides to get rid of the sales taxes on the purchase of new tugboats. The government called it a housekeeping measure. But coincidentally, shortly after the taxes disappear, Irving buys the first in a fleet of new tugboats, saving itself a lot of money. The relationship between the Irvings and government is a close one, and not without some friction. We saw last night that when the Irvings want government money for a new box plant or a new toilet paper plant, it gets it. That is when things go smoothly. The friction occurs when government tries to get the Irvings to do something they don't want to do. Here's an example of that.
Notice how deep it is. 2 inches. Nice thing to hit in a boat now and then.
This is South Bay in southern New Brunswick, a body of water cluttered with debris left over from Irving pulp operations. In 1991, the government asked the Irvings to clean it up. In 1994, they asked again. In 1995, the government ordered a cleanup. The Irvings refused, and the government backed right off. Years later, after some negative publicity, Irving did start to clean up South Bay. But the way they handled the whole thing convinced many people the Irvings don't have to follow the same rules the rest of us do, that they get preferential treatment from governments worried about the company's economic clout. Lawmakers in Maine are very aware of what can happen when a company gets too big. That's why politicians like Thomas Wright set up legislation to keep tabs on what the Irvings and the other companies are doing in Maine's gasoline industry. Wright says if a company like the Irvings gets too big and threatens the best interests of consumers, the Attorney General gets involved.
If he finds that there is an area where one company or another looks to be pushing their prices lower than the fair market value, then he would have the authority to report to the Petroleum Advisory Board, and we'd look at the data and then give him the authority to either investigate further or, if it was severe enough, to prosecute.
Our legislatures in the Maritimes haven't gone nearly that far. There's no watchdog here to sound the alarm when there's a worrisome economic development. Now, some people say maybe there should be. Not a watchdog to control the Irvings or to regulate them, but a watchdog to let us know when a company gets so big it starts to have a negative effect on other players in the economy. That way, remedies can be worked out.
Irving often responds to criticism by saying that it knows what's best for everybody.
We have an obligation, we're running something to look after our workers, and that's the way it is. And so anything we did there was in the best interests of everybody concerned.
J.K. Irving used that argument in justifying a hard contract the family imposed on Shelburne ship workers. And his daughter, Mary Jean, used it to rebuke island protesters who wanted Wendy's to stop selling Irving French fries until the company cut back on pesticide use.
And by coming out here to Wendy's, you don't want to see the Wendy's contract canceled on Prince Edward Island, I'll tell you right now, because you'll put people out of jobs, and we've just gone to a lot of work to do the thing.
And Irving will lose a lot of money.
Well, it's not so much Irving that I'm worried about.
That's what they're worried about.
Oh, you think so, eh? Okay.
All this week, you've seen just how big this corporate empire is. You've seen how much power it has, and how it uses that power in ways that can affect your life. So, faced with the question, have the Irvings been good or bad for the Maritimes, Maritimers are going to have to think about their own experiences with that power, assess how this vast empire has affected their lives. That is the answer.
And so that concludes our series, The Irvings, Unlocking the Mystery. Now, we'd like to hear what you think. We're going to ask you what impact you think the Irvings have had on the Maritimes. And we're going to ask that question in a special phone-in on NB Now Monday night. Now, you can also see the internet version of the entire series by going to our website, and you'll see the address for that in just a moment. Finally tonight, we'd like to thank members of the Irving family and staff for being so generous with their time and for providing personal archival material that helped us unlock the mystery. For all of us here at MB Now, good night, have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday. Good night.
Can't forget about those people.